Hello, I'm Cookie Stoner, and welcome to Cookie Stoner Presents. We are on a video chat today with Nancy Thomas from Montgomery, Alabama, who is a licensed professional counselor. And Nancy, welcome again, Nancy. We're on our second segment. Hello.
Thank you.
Hello.
It's good to be here.
Great. Nancy has worked extensively in her private practice when she was in private practice with the LGBTQ community. And as she said, she did not set out to do that, but because she is a woman of great faith and because she wanted to do, as she said, everything with grace, compassion, and love and acceptance, many of her clients and patients she realized in her practice were members of the LGBTQ community. And so because of that, she has worked with them extensively and their families. Nancy, when we finished our other segment, we started talking about, or we ended talking about how, as you said, that, you know, sexuality is fluid. There's a certain period of time when, you know, and I know with different people I've spoken to that, you know, even at like 5 or 6 years old, they may realize, you know, I have a crush on, a boy may have a crush on like this little boy, or this little girl may have a crush on this little girl, and they really don't know what to do with it when they see their other friends only having a crush on the opposite sex, but they really don't really start not even that they understand it when they're right before puberty, but maybe those feelings become more intense. And so as they work through their age process, or or the developmental, as you said, this all becomes developmental. And that's what, when you and I were discussing this earlier, is when people who have such they're so opposed to, gay people or the thought of someone being gay, is that they think that it becomes a choice. And with people who work in this, especially as medical professionals or, professionals, in mental health or someone who studies and researches, you see this process from the time they're young until the time that they have perhaps this acceptance. And it's a long process, correct?
Yes, it can be a very long process, and I'd like to say that this is very different from being transgendered, and that awareness comes along in preschool. But sexual orientation, attraction is something that usually comes. They become fully aware of it around puberty or a little before puberty.
I am so glad that you just brought that up because, okay, and I'm not trying to, I know that you know, and as I told you, I want to make sure, but even for viewers, I have seen this, okay, sexual orientation, sexuality really comes, as you said, more when they're in puberty, hormones, those intense feelings like any, as you said, any child, whether they have an attraction to the opposite sex, when they want to have those relationships. Transgendered is gender identity. It has nothing to do at that point with being with sex. I actually saw and I hate to speak to social media, but that's where a lot of people tell their opinions or get their information. And someone actually made or stated a post that said, something about, parents who were allowing their child, who was a young, probably like 13-year-old child, began living as the opposite gender than this child was born. And then in this same post, this person made the comment that how dangerous that is, because next are they going to now allow this child to have sex? And I screenshot it and sent it to a dear friend of mine from Montgomery, who hopefully she will be on as one of our guests as a mother of a transgendered child. And I said I wanted to say something on post, but I try not to pick fights, or I try just to scroll on by. because his people were all agreeing with him. But I thought to myself, sexuality, having sex, this is about gender. I mean, and people. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Well, and it's very confusing. It's some of where the latest research is focused, and gender orientation has to do with how you feel on the inside, whether or not you feel male or female on the inside. And toddlers are very aware, can be very aware of that at a very early age. And they'll tell you, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, when in fact, they aren't from all appearances. And so for the parents who are raising transgendered children, it is, they're trying to protect their children, and it's really very difficult for them to decide what to do. But what happens is when you deny who someone feels like they are, then that shame, just like with the sexual orientation, the attraction is so great that the depression and suicide and all of that can be just overwhelming. And it is not something someone decides to do. Again, it's who they feel like they are on the inside. And there's a lot of new research on that. It's not conclusive, but gender orientation is very different from sexual attraction. And you can have a gender orientation, and your sexual attraction can be very different from what your gender orientation is. So I don't know if that makes sense.
No.
It's sort of hard to keep up with.
No,
But so you can be born a boy anatomically, know on the inside that you feel you're a woman, and know it for years and years and years. And then when you reach adolescence, you can also be attracted to women.
I understand. And that's okay. Now, that's interesting that you just said that, because, well, I was actually having this conversation with someone the other day when I had been reading about, not only talking to my friend who has a trans child, and then talking to a young man we know who is hopefully going to also be a guest. He born female. He is now, born anatomically female, and but always knew. And he's now a young man. But understanding, and then you have people who don't understand it, who will say such cruel things like, well, how are we supposed to know, da 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 da. Well, first of all, it's really not for you to understand or not for you to know. Just be kind and compassionate, that if this person is born say, as you just said, born a male, then has always known they were female, and yet they're still attracted to females, then perhaps, and then people sort of joke, what does that mean, you're a lesbian? Or I think in the end, it really doesn't matter. It, as you just said, it's sort of, like, okay, well, I don't know. I mean, I was born a male, I'm now a female, and I still like females. And so you hear, people who are, I see people, it's so sad when they joke about it, or and I certainly will not, allow that or participate, because I have seen the pain, and it's not a joking matter, because it's truly their life and what they're dealing with.
I think people joke and say things when they are fearful.
Sure, of course they are.
A lot of times. And so, I mean, that's in politics, that's
in everything.
Health concerns, sure. That's in all these sexual issues. Mm-hmm. And so I think that probably the best thing to do for everybody is to just really try to understand, arm yourself with as much knowledge as you can. And I don't mean, literal interpretation of the Bible. I mean arm yourself by getting to know and understand people who've been through that process, reading the science, reading the
Yes, the
research,
science.
participating in therapy. Um, I've had parents who come to me because their children are adults and have come out, and they're very, very upset because they think their children are going to hell and they can't accept it. And what are we going to do? All that kind of stuff. And, I coach them through that process, and sometimes it takes years. But one of the things that I have to say is, if you're going to do this hard line and say, I'm going to cut you out of our family, we're not going to tolerate that. And so you have to realize that that is something that is probably not going to change. And that means that you're going to lose your loved one. Mm-hmm. So you can either, lose your loved one and not have a relationship with them, or you can go on this journey with them.
Right.
And help them, become who God intends them to be and maintain your sense of family. And you really need to decide which one of those it's going to be, because it's probably not going to change.
Okay, in fact, you just said that who God intended them to be. When we go back to, let's speak back to that the transgender. When I have heard people over, the years that it's been, more in, I guess, the mainstream media, and of course in TV shows, as far as the trans community, and people would say things like, God doesn't make mistakes. I always, for me, the way I looked at it was, okay, well, some children are born with holes in their heart, which must be repaired. Mm-hmm. Some children are born with the gender being switched, or the gender and the incorrect gender. So that has to be repaired, as does a hole in the heart. Is that a good way, sort of a good analogy, or a good way to say it, or it's?
Well, one of the things that I try to say, and I think this hits home sometimes, is let me ask you this. You're heterosexual, and they always say, of course I am. And I say, do you know what made you heterosexual? And they said, well, God did. That's just how I am. That's how I've always been. I said, okay. And I say, so do you think that you could change your sexual orientation? Do you think you could change your attraction from, heterosexual to gay? And of course they say, absolutely not. And I say, okay, well, what you're asking your family member to do is exactly what you're saying you could under no uncertain terms do. And the problem is that we really don't know fully. We know it's a process, but we don't know fully why some people develop and have that orientation and some people don't. So if you don't know what made you heterosexual other than you were born that way, what makes you think, that someone who's gay knows and can change it?
It's so logical, but it's just one of those things that people don't. That should be the dialogue we all are having. And another thing, the same way as far as the gender identity, it's just if you have a young woman or a little girl, a female, who in her mind thinks she's a boy, and she tells you she's a boy and she believes that in her mind, but on her body is a girl. It's just like with a little girl who only thinks is a little girl. She couldn't say, hey, I want to be a boy, So you're right. They couldn't change. What we see as normal, we couldn't change. So someone who was born even in the wrong body, they couldn't, try as hard. And that's why I think, as you said, it has been so difficult in whether it's gender or whether it's sexuality, because society says it's one way, and if we don't do that, then people, as you said, have the guilt, the shame, they're judged, and then they become the sometimes the butt of jokes, or just as you said, people do deal with fears sometimes with laughter or whatever, but some of those I have noticed is just, some of it's just cruel. And we would not,
Well, yeah, I think it can. I think it can be, but again, I think sometimes the cruelty even comes out of a fear um, of not understanding,
and
of
their
thinking it's
ignorance, yes.
catching.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, and we also have been taught, for the most part, that it is terribly wrong,
And
and
the
so
word
our
that everybody
spiritual
says,
identity.
abomination. That's the
Yeah.
word.
Well, you have to realize our spiritual formation is coming along at the same time that our other identity formation is coming along. As Jesus said, as a child, you believe like a child. I can't remember the quote exactly, but as you mature, your faith changes from something very simple, Bible story kind of faith, into
Yes.
something more complex and deeper, and you have a greater understanding. Well, that's the same way for sexuality, gender identity, sexual attraction, sexual orientation, is that matures over time. Hopefully, we all do. And so to just assume that when you're born, you're cooked, this is it, this is all
Right,
you'll
right.
ever be,
Yes.
is so unfortunate interpretation. I mean, I certainly hope that's not true. I certainly would not want to be the same person I was when I
No,
was 5
yeah.
years old.
Evolving. Yeah, we all want to evolve.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, God has spoken to me so much. And gosh, just since I've been a counselor, I mean, I've had a very strong faith since adolescence, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. Gosh, I've known every decision I ever made that was wrong, he was tapping me on the shoulder saying, okay, now come on back. But at the same time, I never really lost touch. I knew he was there. I knew it was part of my life, and it was important to me. And it's just only gotten more mature, and I love that. But people who have not had the fortune of being cradled by their faith and have been horribly shamed or wounded by their faith, it can make it so difficult to go through these trials and tribulations. And, we need to be able to help them maintain that faith and stay in the community that is wholesome and loving and caring for them while they go through this experience.
Okay. Now I know that it is almost 1 o'clock, and I know that you were very kind that you got us on your during your lunch today, and you haven't eaten, so I'm definitely going to have to come down to Montgomery and take you to lunch or take you to dinner, which I do want to hang out with you. You are just, first of all, you're a delightful person, but your knowledge. I just know that working in your practice, I can tell that you've helped a lot of people. Is there anything that you think that we've missed out on, or I didn't ask, and we can always revisit this, but is there anything else that you can think of that perhaps I've missed, or just something that before we go that you would like to say or speak on?
Well, I would like to say that I think that this issue is hugely important, just as many other social issues are hugely important, and that our society seems to be becoming more and more harsh and oppressive to people who are not in the position of having privilege.
Yes.
And what I mean by privilege is like mainstream,
Right.
Financially secure, just like everybody else.
Right.
and people who are struggling because of the rights that are denied to them, and the LGBTQ community is one of those communities that is struggling to have protection.
Yes.
And I look at it much like when I think about what's going on in our society, I think, how we care for the least of these will end up being how we are cared for.
Yes.
Because all of us at some time or another are going to be sick, we're going to be old, we're going to be tired. At some point in our life, we're going to be dependent on the care and love and just what other people can do for us. I don't care how much money we have, how much
Yes.
privilege we have.
Right.
We're going to be dependent at some point in our life and lonely and scared. And, if we cannot be kind and accepting and tolerant, I think all of us at some point in our lives are going to be without and need more.
Yes. Wow. Nancy, I will tell you, I am, and I did tell you before we started, I said, oh, I hope I don't sound stupid. But the best part is, I have always learned that when you surround yourselves with wonderful, intelligent people who are great spirits and great conversationalists, they will always help you feel better, look better, sound better. And I think that's what you've done for me today. It's been so easy.
Thanks.
Well, it's been so easy to talk to you, and I just appreciate your time so much. I do want to come down, as I say, come to Montgomery and hang out with you. But what we'll do is, before you and I'll hang up in just a minute, but we're going to end this segment. Thank you again to Nancy Thomas from Montgomery,
You're welcome.
licensed professional counselor, and you're just a gem. And so I do appreciate you very much, and we appreciate you all watching.